The 2012 Time Path, Part 3. My name is Daniel Vallis and welcome to our channel. So, this is very important when we look at our path. When did our learning journey start? It started exactly on August 12th, 2012. I've gone over this in depth in our videos, Time Intersections, just some of the things the Lord brought me on. We are going to rehash some of that here because it's very important, but that is when the Brooke Cherith ministry really started. Because I'd been working on another ministry project up until that point, the Lord did a major intervention on that day, completely stopped the previous ministry, but He emphasized at the same time, the same day, that He was reserving me for a prophetic ministry because the week prior to that day, He had me study for the first time. I hadn't really studied it up until that point, the last generation. I knew about it. But that week prior to that, He had me actually sit down and pencil out the math of the last generation, realizing He's talking not about the state of Israel itself, the government. He's talking about the generation, the people, the biological clock. So when I penciled it out, I was really sober that, wow, we're hitting the median age of 70 right now in 2012. And it was so important because I had that scrap of paper with that calculation on it about the last generation. I had penciled it out. I had mocked it up on the computer a little bit too. And I was really sober because I could tell the Lord was starting to impress this prophetic subject right while I was working on another completely unrelated project too. So I knew the Lord was pressing the prophetic timing and that we were running out of time because once you hit 70, the average lifespan there, obviously it goes downhill real quickly to 80. Not a lot of people make it to 80. So I knew we're hitting 70 now. That means the tribulation is supposed to happen. There's still 7 years. That means we are really short on time. And I started, of course, raising questions. Should I be doing the ministry project that I'm doing now, or should I focus on more prophecy stuff? And I could tell the Lord was really emphasizing the prophecy needed the hour, and that He was bringing up the subject very, very heavily. I definitely knew that. And then on that day, when I had that piece of paper in my pocket, I was over at these people's house, some friends. I was over at their house. We were in the living room, and somebody was just flipping through the channels on the TV and briefly came to the closing ceremony of the London 2012 Olympics. Right, the exact moment when they were lowering the Phoenix right over the flaming cauldron, right at that exact moment. And he's just flipping through the channels. And he only stayed there for not even 10 seconds, but just is briefly long enough for me to register because I knew the Olympics were going on. As soon as I saw that, I was like, whoa, wow, this is major. Because I had already been looking at the opening ceremony of the Olympics. I already knew it was dark and occult. I had already made some notes on that already. And so for me to see that at that exact moment, when the subject of the last generation was in my pocket, on my person, and I already knew the Lord was pressing the prophetic time, and then I saw that, the Spirit really moved in my soul at that moment of really pointing. It's almost as though He put a finger right and pointing at the TV. Do you see that? Do you see that? And I was really speechless because I was really moved on the inside of seeing the importance. The enemy knows exactly what time it is. Knows exactly what time it is. And then things went downhill from there because certain red flags were brought up about some of the children in our church that I had to raise issue about and ultimately go to the police about. So a lot stopped on that day with my previous ministry relating to that church there too. But I knew during the midst of it all that the Lord was doing it all deliberately because that day started with me knowing the Lord is pressing prophecy for a reason, the last generation for a reason. I already went into that day not knowing what I was about to step into. I already knew the Lord, He's getting ready to change my path to prophecy. And I already had my informedchristians.com website, and since 2003, I already been talking a lot about different Christian living things, but not really focusing on prophecy. But I could tell the Lord was really pushing, you need to start on this now. And then I saw the closing ceremony. It was sometime around lunchtime earlier in the day. And I saw that, and that really went with what He had already been working. And then it was only about an hour or two after that closing ceremony that the other events transpired and came to my attention that I realized the Lord was doing something to deliberately change my path. And it was a very difficult day for sure. It was a very tough row to hoe, but the Lord definitely gave strength through it. And that's also what I noticed too. It was the last thing I wanted to do, really, to address the subject. It's so much easier just to pretend you don't see certain subjects, or when things are brought to your attention, it's so much easier just to pretend you don't see. Particularly when you know addressing a subject is going to completely derail and change things forever. So with every fiber of my being, I did not want to address the subject and the individuals. And I was physically ill. I did not want to do it. But at the same time, I knew the Lord was giving supernatural strength that was not coming from me. I knew He wanted me to address it. It needed to be addressed. People need to stand up for those situations, those who are hurt. It was the right thing that needed to be done. And I also knew the Lord was wanting me to go forward and was instrumental to what He had already been showing me relating to the time. And He was giving me strength above measure. And so that's another reason why I was able to go forward with it, knowing, Lord, I don't know what I just stepped into here. I don't know what's going on, but I can see your hand at work. So I will go forward and do what you want me to do. And of course, that shut everything down with the ministry project there at that church and completely cut off all communication with them and all that. So the Lord stopped everything. It was full stop. And the Lord really directed the prophetic focus, and within a few weeks I was already working on the Last Generation poster, because I knew the Lord orchestrated those events that I did not understand, did not have all the details, but I knew He brought it to light. He's a revealer of secrets. He revealed it at that time, on that day, for a reason, because He wanted me to full stop and to dive into prophecy resources. And He was giving wisdom to do that and the strength to do that. So I threw myself into that, and that helped as a coping mechanism too, in some ways, just be able to apply myself to that. And also at the same time, just starting to go forward on other interests that I had too, because there's, a fresh start in many ways. So I was able to just start other hobbies and apply myself to them. And so I started applying myself to the apothecary and herbal medicine, which I already had an interest in. And in light of the prophecy that He was showing about the last generation, I knew, okay, we're almost out of time. We're at the end of the last generation, which means the tribulation is about to start. I can apply my herbal understanding of medicine to provide a clinic and some means to help them during the tribulation, something that could be left behind. So it was in 2013 that I started taking a metal shed that we had here and start transforming it into a literal walk-in apothecary clinic with a little exam area and a little work area where you could prep different herbal preparations and stuff. So that 2013 is when I really started the medical clinic aspect here at the Brook Cherith. And it was August 12th, 2012, those events that the Lord really emphasized, and that's where I really adopted the name that, yes, this was the Brook Cherith. Just like Elijah was brought to the Brook Cherith and fed by the ravens, I knew the Lord brought me and put me on a path. Very deliberately, very isolated, very hard. But it was a path that He brought me, a place He brought me to the inn here at the Brook Cherith for a reason related to the prophetic time, using understanding and hobbies and interests that I already had prior, applying them both together here at the Brook Cherith. And so then again, understanding prophecy that we're running out of time, the Lord also used that clinic preparation to pass on that information to be helpful to others. And that's when we first published our Disaster Crash Course at the beginning of 2014, Volume 1, with a lot of tips that can help them once things hit the fan and the sun destruction comes. The Lord worked the application of going forward with the understanding of what's coming prophetically, of how to help and be a Samaritan to those in the days ahead. In 2014 already. And it was early 2014 when I started laying the foundation for what would become the igloo, which would eventually become the surgical part for that same clinic. I didn't know it when I started laying the foundation. I was just building a larger shed because I didn't have a shed other than a clinic shed. So I started building that, and then as it was all closed in, the Lord gave such clear wisdom that this is going to be the surgical center for your clinic that you're building for the prophetic time that you see. that I am showing you and giving you wisdom on this path that I have deliberately placed you on, and you know I have deliberately placed you on this path. So 2014 is when I started building the igloo, and then later in 2014 is when we published Volume 2 about establishing a disaster medical clinic using a lot of the same pictures and the setup of that operating center there that we started. And it was in context of the clinic that I started building a human hamster wheel. Now, this is the only photo I have of it because it was just a hobby project, and I have these other things in the way, but you can get an idea of it was a human hamster wheel. The ceiling's 10 feet tall, so it was about 8 feet in diameter. It was huge and super heavy too. Once you got it going, if it fell off the rails, it probably would have gone right through the wall. It was very heavy. But I started painting it black. It became a real money pit because I didn't know exactly what I was doing. But the whole idea was I wanted to make a human hamster wheel to run a generator head to provide power for the clinic. Because you're always going to have manpower available in a disaster, so put all those warm bodies to use. Instead of spending money on diesel, which will be very short and unavailable during a disaster, especially long term during the tribulation. So I wanted to build a prototype, and I just love MacGyvering things, so that's why I built it. And you'll notice it's built right in what was the apothecary or the inn. We'll get back to that in a moment. But this human hamster wheel took a lot more money than I wanted. I started painting it black because it had a truck bed liner grit in it, so you could run on it a lot bit better. So I was just playing with that project while at the same time working on those posters that you see there about the last generation. And that's that poster you see almost dead center right there. It's the poster of the last generation. Because both of these were working concurrently on the path that the Lord had brought me on. And I was really starting to keep track of what was going on the calendar days. What's the enemy doing? What are the celestial signs that we're seeing? Really start journaling our journey. Journaling the path that the Lord had brought me on. And again, this was only 2014, so Star of Bethlehem hadn't happened yet. Only 2 blood moons had happened. So there wasn't a lot of celestial things. There were a few, but there was a lot with just the last generation and the developments there that I knew were almost at a time. And that propelled the clinic preparations with the human hamster wheel. But it is also around that time that the Lord was bringing up the subject of time and the Mandela effect and just a lot of other questions and controversies that were going on with what other people were noticing about time. Other watchmen, a lot of people's attention were suddenly brought to time, and CERN started to become a subject because a lot more was becoming public about this major underground machine that they're working on over there, and then discrepancies and things. So that subject was coming on while at the same time, on a parallel track, I'm building a human hamster wheel. Crazy as it is. But I knew the Lord was giving abundant wisdom for all the clinic preparations, the entire surgical suite. He was giving strength for it also. I just kept going. I knew the Lord was having me prepare the human hamster wheel for a reason. I didn't know what the reason was, but at the same time starting to study all the time and Mandela stuff and CERN. And of course, it's very confusing. It's overwhelming. And the question came up, Lord, am I going crazy? You're talking about time and prophecy. Yeah, it looks like that's what Daniel's talking about. The Antichrist is going to be given power to change times and laws. You're going to put it into his hand to do that. He can't do it until you put it into his hand. But Lord, this is crazy. Am I going crazy? I really had those thoughts because it's not just a subject you pick up lightly for sure. And then, of course, the implications in prophecy are staggering too. Because you realize the tribulation is not as straightforward as you think, and it really puts a whole new meaning when Christ says he's going to shorten the days. And you really understand why Satan is so angry when he realizes his time is short, because he can't loop time anymore. So I had all these thoughts of, Lord, I can't teach this subject because I have no frame of reference. Yes, this is what Scripture says, but I have no frame of reference for it. It's all theoretical. And based on Scripture, this is the interpretation and straightforward, and other people were talking on the same thing. And yes, it seems to be unanimous that this is what it means. But Lord, this is going to be a huge step if we start talking on this subject. With the prophetic subjects we're already talking about relating to the last generation. Already talking about. And Lord, you've already started me talking about those. If we're going to weave in the subject of time, this is going to be a huge step here. I need some help. And I was literally in this room, walking into this room, and I was just talking with the Lord about these questions. And I was basically saying to the Lord, help my unbelief, because this is beyond me. I can't understand this. Am I going crazy? Is this subject really what you want us to be focusing on? It was at that moment, at the beginning of 2015, when I had worked on it, spent a lot of money on it, started painting it black, and started putting on the cross struts to it as well. And it wasn't working the way I wanted it to work. It didn't run smoothly, so I was already frustrated with it. And Lord, why are you having me build this huge hamster wheel here in my living room? At the same time, Lord, am I going crazy about time? And it was at that moment when I walked into the room, walking right up to it, that the Lord, it was almost as though He said it. It was that clear that it just popped into my head. It was as though He said, what do you have in your living room? What have you just built in your living room? And it was as though He just opened my eyes and I just saw it completely different. All of a sudden I'm realizing, wow, I just built a black hole in my living room. A huge black hole that looks just like CERN. Wow. It really struck me. It was, because then I could say, wow, Lord, thank you. You were already preparing a way to help my faith, help my unbelief, by already having me work on an illustration for what you've been trying to show me on this path that you've put me, relating to time and prophecy. You've already been working that into the path that you've placed us here, illustrations to help me grasp and understand what your word is saying. And so I was able to say, thank you, Lord. Thank you. And I was able to go forward in faith. Okay, we're going to teach this. That's what Scripture says. And Lord, you are working in incredible ways that I cannot explain, but it is beautiful to see. And it is so encouraging to go forward in faith, seeing His hand leading us along this path over these years. And it's just a few months after that, June 30th, the Star of Bethlehem celestial sign, the world news talked about it, hadn't happened in 2,000 years. Right within days and hours, when the Lord worked out the unique circumstances where I could give the time presentation at a local church. Because I had shared some of my time research and prophecy with the local pastor a couple weeks before, and he said, can you teach this to one of our Sunday night sessions? And I was not ready for that at all, but I was like, well, yeah, I guess so. And so I quickly threw together a presentation, Time, CERN, and Bible, went over it, and started part 1 the Sunday before the Star of Bethlehem event, and did part 2 the following Sunday. And the Lord just worked it out, and the pastor, again, just asked me out of the blue. I didn't think I was ready to start talking about it, but the Lord also provided that opportunity because I'd been studying the Mandela effect too, knowing that time has already been tampered with. We're not where we are supposed to be. We are on some sort of a sidetrack, some sort of diversion away from where we should be prophetically. We're at the right time with the last generation, but there's a lot that indicates something has been tampered with because someone is wanting to avoid a certain conclusion. And we knew the Revelation 12 sign was coming up, and so I already had suspicion that someone's trying to throw a monkey wrench into things. So I had the subject of the Mandela effect. The Lord gave the teaching opportunity, and the Lord said basically in the second session, why don't you test the audience on the Mandela effect so you can see the reality of it? You know, it's one thing to read about it on the internet and just hear all sorts of confusion about it too, but it's another thing to take the most qualified examples that I knew, and then test the audience on it, and it was 99% a very certain clear direction. That yes, time has been tampered with. The Lord provided those opportunities. I didn't ask for them whatsoever. And so I knew the Lord was showing me something about time. He was weaving it into this journey that He started back from 2012, when I knew they were emphasizing time. But I also knew He was weaving in this clinic into the prophetic events that we knew are coming this time of perplexity. And that He was using the clinic in ways that would be helpful but also illustrative along the learning journey down on our path. We would see things on the celestial heavens, we could see things the enemy were doing, but He's also placing things on our path because He is here with us on the path. giving wisdom about it because he wants us to know. And it's very shortly after that, the Lord gave wisdom for the Antichrist Returns, the PDF resource, talking about the beast who is coming up out of the bottomless pit, the technology that CERN is based on, the Nazi scientists who is well documented started CERN and were involved with the technology there. The more that you know history, the more you see how it all fits together. And the Lord gave a lot of wisdom and insight, connecting a lot of pieces to this puzzle. Shortly after that, the Circle of the Earth investigation with direct end-time implications. That PDF also listed in the description box. We live in a giant clock. And once you start seeing how Scripture describes the world in which we live, you start to understand why certain things are possible and why the heavens shall be shaken. And why it's so important to get off the face of the whole earth. There's a lot of things that tie together that the Lord was giving very important information and resources about at this junction on our path. Knowing we would still have ways to go, he knew that, but it'd be information that would be very, very important. And then shortly after that, the Time of Perplexity PDF resource, just compiling some of the concise notes about the time implications in prophecy. And this was really the start of our YouTube ministry, right at July 2015, because that's when we posted the videos of the Time, CERN, in the Bible presentation and the results of the live demonstration there at the church. Our first two videos were from right here on this YouTube channel, where you joined me on a journey and path that the Lord already started back in 2012. You have joined me on this journey. The Lord has brought you across this path for a reason. You need to find out what that reason is, but he wants to show you something. And I hope it has been a blessing, encouragement, and provoking to love and unto good works, so much more as he shows us the day is approaching, that time of perplexity. The midst of 2015 was the start of our YouTube channel. And of course, later that same year, November 2015, that's when the peace and safety calls really went out. And so in context, again, of seeing everything, realizing we are super short on time, and gave us a great sense of urgency. And the Lord really had us produce a lot of videos during that time, a lot of resources. And so that really took up a lot of my time, just producing that, particularly understanding that the Revelation 12 sign was coming up. So the Lord really had me focused on videos and PDF resources during that time. So I really didn't have a lot of bandwidth for the clinic, although I tinkered with it here and there, but the majority of my time was with the clinic. It wasn't until after the Revelation 12 sign that the Lord brought my time and attention back to the clinic. Because I also knew, okay, we passed the Revelation 12 sign. I know it's an important star date, and I know we will come back to that. And I was warning people about that before the Revelation 12 sign. We are probably going to pass it because time has already been tampered with. We know that from the Mandela effect. So I wasn't surprised at all when we passed it. A little disappointed, but not surprised because that's what we were expecting. Time has already been tampered with. We're already off the rails somewhere. We will come back to that. And so the Lord used that quiet time to focus, okay, you have already built the surgical center, you have the other clinic areas, but you also know there's a lot more that you need because you need a patient recovery area, you need the triage areas. Start working on the clinic now again. It's part of your journey. It's part of what I brought your attention to back in early 2013, late 2012. It is part of your journey. And you know it relates to prophecy and what is coming up. And you also know, Revelation 12, there will be people who go to a place that is prepared. Somebody else has prepared that place. You can play a part in also preparing a place for those who will be here during the tribulation days. And so we went forward on starting to build patient areas, start working on the clinic again. And that started really taking up more of my time and attention. We didn't make a lot of videos during time because the Lord was directing to what is on our path that is important to understanding the path. And so, of course, after the hurricanes, after Revelation 12 that hit Puerto Rico and the medical tie-ins there, that led to Volume 3 of our Disaster Crash Course, Preparing Medical Fluid Solutions. And then we started working on the patient wing, work area, and water tower 2018. And then other areas, started expanding what we knew would be needed for preparing a place. And there was a lot that would be needed, we knew for sure. 2019, the Lord gave so much strength in April. Start building out the different areas of triage, start interconnecting all these areas, start working together as a whole clinic, as a whole, with all the different departments. The Lord gave incredible strength to build all that. And then 2020 was very unique in context of everything unfolding in the world. And after the celestial signs that we saw in 2019, because Jupiter the King was where? He was at Scorpius, also under the feet of Ophiuchus, and approaching the Milky Way. So we also knew 2019 was very important, 2020 was going to be very important, and we knew the Great Conjunction was going to be there too. We knew that was related to time. So there's a lot that's also hastening work on the clinic, because you know you're running out of time, and you also know, based on Revelation 12, 1,260 days star date count, there's a certain window after that sign that is also going to be running out of time. And so we were really trying to finish up and wrap up, get the clinic fully operational before that window ran out. So at the beginning of 2020, the Lord worked miraculously on providing the funds within hours of picking up the shovel and digging in the dirt to start the service area project for the service things that we needed to help run the clinic, the laundry department, the maintenance, the generator trailer, the laundry trailer, all that we knew needed to be finished up to get things really topped off had to be done and finished within 2020, in the beginning of 2021, because we knew we were running out of time. But again, where was Jupiter? At Sagittarius, indicating he's holding back the bow. You have a little bit more time, but you are running out of time. And so praise the Lord, at the end of 2020, we really got the clinic as far as it could go. It got functional, and I'll say that quote unquote because there are a lot of limitations at the clinic, just from its location and all that, and the number of people who helped, or didn't help, I should say. But it got as far as we could take it at 2021. That's where it really peaked out. But you'll also remember around that time, I started telling you, okay, we know the Lord prepared these trailers, the generator trailer, laundry trailer, because the clinic is not meant to be here. This is a rehearsal. This is a temporary. We should really focus on getting everything mobile, because the Lord showed us this, been showing it to us for a while. We've known this for most of the journey. This is not the best place for it. It's intended to be mobile. And so we put out the plans to mobilize everything. That's when the Lord also emphasized Operation Burning Lamp, remember? He emphasized it back in 2020 and started getting more details for it. That's when we started working on the Rapture Library materials, started working on the posters, because we knew He wanted us to make it mobile. In 2021, putting out all the plans, showing you, yes, it's all been thought out. Here's the logistics for it. In April of 2021, that's when we finished up the main exhibits, finished up the main posters. I said, folks, it's ready. Help me. Brethren, help us. Launch out into the deep. And it was also at that time when the limitations of the structures at the Brook Cherith were reaching their maximum fail points, because they were tents. And some of the tents were started in 2017, which means they were 4 years old for some of them. And they were all temporary structures, so they're starting to show their age. And then the condition of some of the trees nearby, the Lord was really emphasizing, this is not the final place. This is the rehearsal. You need to move on out. All of you need to launch out into the deep. And so that's when we started having to decommission some of the structures, just because they were starting to fall apart and water eventually seeps into the tents and everything. So I started having to decommission and tear down the clinic, which I mentioned it in different posts and different thoughts. I shared it as we went forward on this journey, the disappointment of how many people don't want to act when the Lord brings us on a journey forward. How they don't want to act when the Lord is the one guiding us by the hand on the path. And when He shows us so much that is available to us if we just launch out. So I shared the disappointment, but also I shared that this is also illustrative too. Because in a way we're starting to work backwards. And that goes with the time concept. He had us build all this for a reason, for a certain time. And at the beginning of 2021, you'll remember I had the time countdown video. Prior to the end of the 12,260 days running out, I told you we don't know if the clinic is going to be used in the future past. When the time loops start, we don't know. We do know the Lord prepared it for this specific time. Whether it's going to be used in the past, or whether He's just testing us on our obedience and whether we can hear, whether we have any kind of heart at all. He's testing us definitely for sure, testing our faith, testing us in so many ways. It might be used in the past. We don't know. But we do know it was timely when He had us build it. So when we came into the midst of 2021, started having to take it down, after the 1,260 days, started realizing or just started contemplating, in a way, we're starting to go backwards here on the path that the Lord had me ever since 2013. Because that's when I started building and laying the foundations for some of these structures. So as I'm taking them down, in my mind, I'm thinking back to 2013, late 2012. Because that's the mileage I have traveled that the Lord brought me on this path since 2012. So as I start taking it down, I'm mentally going in reverse. I'm mentally backing up time-wise. I'm thinking all this is going backwards now. We're moving backwards. And I made a comment or two about it in some of our videos in 2021. But in 2022, we really were finishing up most of the pack up and the demolition and just the closure out of the rehearsal site. So the time came when we had to move the trailers away from the clinic and moved them down to the barn. Then started clearing out the igloo, the surgical suite, just completely gutted it. And that was very emotional for me, again, because I'm looking backwards. I'm seeing all this is, we're going back to 2012. Because in my mind, I look at the igloo and I see something that was started in late 2012, early 2013, the process that led up to the igloo. That's the way I see it, because I see the greater path, because I was on it before you joined along. Ever since 2011, 2012, I had seen the Lord's hand work through it all. I knew He has brought us exactly to every single step along this way, for a reason. And when we go forward faith obediently in response of how He's trying to guide us forward on this path, when we do so, He gives incredible liberty and wisdom and shows us things that we would never see or understand about this path unless He is the one showing us. But if we pull away from Him, He won't give us wisdom then, or liberty, or strength. It's only by drawing nigh to Him obediently when He tells us to go forward, when He tells us to launch out into the deep, when He tells us, follow me. And of course, this is 2022, after 2020, when the King was at Sagittarius, the crown. When we told everyone our King is watching us, what kind of crown we're going to have. When He comes, He's going to reward every man according as his work shall be. He will test us. He will prove His disciples. And we should be very sober and alert to the fact that He will be testing us along this path in some way. And He has been for years. And so is at that time that Elsa presented to everybody, the Lord still has opportunities of service. We can still launch out into the deep. He is still impressing. Let's mobilize all this medical supplies to be used. Let's put it in the cabinets. Let's make it mobile. We can still use this. Let's launch out in the deep. Help us, brethren. That was presented. Also presented, it could easily be moved into trailers. We know what was the rehearsal. He gave us all that background information, that experience for a reason. We knew back in 2020 it's going to be mobile. It had to be taken somewhere else. We were preparing for it in 2020. Let's do it. He's giving wisdom about it. He's giving liberty. He's showing us the way, fields. He's showing us opportunities. Placing it on our path, right in front of us. Still emphasizing Operation Burning Lamp. Right when Jupiter was where? Is it Pisces? Is it Aquarius? All while the heavens are tracing a celestial path, the King is watching us on our path. The path where He placed us, the path where He brought us, and He's going to see how we respond to where He puts us. And He's observing how we respond to what He places right in front of us along the path. You also remember late 2022, the Lord worked miraculous events preparing the resources for why God, the different illustrative examples He placed right in our path to pick up the shovel. Keep picking up the shovel. Don't just sit there when you know the prophetic time. Especially when you know who has been guiding you by the hand on this path, that He is also showing you these opportunities. Why can't you pick up the shovel? The Lord prepared the resources. He gave abundant wisdom. He showed the white fields for harvest. He said, go forward. He showed us deliberately that he's even holding the property for us. And yet nobody even wanted to get started going by picking up even so much as a shovel. Here in 2023, we're still here at the property that he's holding. The Lord had us prepare the rapture library in the igloo because that is still on his heart. It is still part of this journey. It's still on the path. He's still going to use it. The Lord is not waiting to use the rapture library someday. He's been using it for the past 8 years. The past 8 years, all the information and wisdom that he has shown us on this journey. Watching, can we use it? Can we be stirred? Can our heart echo the bridegroom's heart? For 8 years, the king has been watching us. And when it became clear that the majority that the Lord had brought along this path don't even want to pick up a shovel, that is when we sold the trailers to gain by trading. Because the Lord expects fruit. He expects fruit. And he is still impressing the Operation Burning Lamp, so he gained by trading by selling those and purchasing the resources to further stock the Rapture Library that he has prepared to be used in his special way. And also further invested in medical supplies to mobilize them, again for the Operation Burning Lamp, which he has consistently impressed along this learning journey. Especially here at the end of the journey, since Jupiter the King has been pointing at Sagittarius, that he's the one restraining, and that we are running out of time. He has consistently emphasized that. And then just the other day in July, I finally got around to cleaning up and decommissioning the last metal shed, the original clinic shed, which was eventually used for the storeroom and herbal preparation area. Finally got around to decommissioning that, and I was just cleaning out the area. I was not really thinking about it so much in this context until I was painting the room, just touching up some holes in the wall and painting it, and that's when the Lord reminded me, you know, this was the very first clinic that you built. The very first piece of the book chair that you built after 2012. It also means as you're working backwards, this is the last piece to be decommissioned as you move backwards. You've decommissioned the other areas of the clinic, the triage areas. You just recently decommissioned the important area, the surgical center. And now, aside from the patient work area, where I still am working on Operation Burning Lamp, I have now had you decommission the final piece, which brings you mentally back along the path close to 2012, doesn't it? And so the Lord used the decommissioning of that shed to really get me thinking along this path and thinking in terms of the 12-year cycle. What started? What was in progress? What is the Lord showing us now about the King at Aries? And just knowing how the celestial clock works, knowing that Jupiter would have been at Aries back at around 2011 and 2012. So the Lord used that going in faith. He was able to give wisdom, again using as an illustration. When we go forward in faith, he gives wisdom on why he worked this into our path. It is part of our path. It really brought my attention to mull on things back to 2012. And then I could notice the circuit pattern from 2011 and 2012. In the median ages of the last generation, praise the Lord, he has given so much wisdom in response to obedience. That is what he's always looking for. He's not looking for success in projects. He's looking for obedience, faithfulness. Who is a wise and faithful servant who will obey, whose heart always says, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Those who have an ear to hear and a heart to hear will hear. They will hear. Well, friends, that's all the time we have for today, but in the next video, in the last part of this series, we will look at some very curious things the Lord has shown us on this particular path that also are very important as we look back at the entire circuit and what the Lord has been revealing all during this time. Maranatha.